Hi, I'm Edward Cohen. Welcome to Tangent. Today on Tangent, we have Marcus Räder, founder and CEO at Hostaway, all-in-one vacation rental software and Airbnb management system. This past summer, Hostaway raised $175 million in the largest single capital raise in the vacation rental tech space to date. Hi, Marcus. Where does this podcast find you?
Hey, thank you very much for having me. I'm calling in from Toronto, Ontario, and I tend to spend about 6 months of the year here, and the rest I do traveling.
Beautiful. You travel, you embody what you do, basically. Let's jump right into it. You started Hostaway in 2015, and since then it has grown to host more than 100,000 short-term rental and vacation properties across 100 countries. Take us to those early days. How did you get started and how did you get to here?
We're a typical overnight success story where everything failed 100 times. Actually, yesterday we had our 8-year anniversary because we decided to found the company exactly 8 years ago. And, the amount of, we did record sales last month, but that's nothing new. We always do record sales, like we go higher and higher. But I had to remind the team that the amount of customers that joined us just last month is the same amount that it took us 6 years to get. Like the total, 6 years of sales, 6 years of customer acquisition, we got it now in 1 month. That's what happens when you do things consistently over a long period of time. And the weirdest part is that these 7-8 years that we've been on this, according to investors, that's super short. There's many tech companies that reach the status where we are, but when you look into the background, they've actually been going at it for 20 years. And maybe they changed business model many times. We sort of had a one shot home run here where we just did one thing and we did it consistently over time, and it became a massive success. We started with a bang, literally. A lot of people died. We were at Airbnb Open 2015 in Paris, and it was interrupted by the Bataclan bombings. So it was only 1.5 days. We were there to verify a theory that there's a lot of professional property managers in the Airbnb space. At the time, it was still called the Airbnb space. Today, it's known as short-term rentals, it's known as vacation rentals, and a lot of other terminology. But back then, it was clearly called Airbnb. And we got what we hoped for. We found a ton of property managers all around the world who were managing hundreds of units, and they were indeed looking for software. So that's what we were starting to build. And that's the journey that we're still on today.
Fascinating. I mean, we're going to talk about Airbnb and we're going to dive deep into Hostaway's business model, how you're doing it. But before then, I want to talk about the state of the short-term rental market. There's arguably more demand now than ever for the product. People are doing not only short-term stays, but they're all doing staycations or work from remote where they rent with their family, go away. Lots of trends happening. We also know there's a lot of regulation coming, especially in a few US states like New York and California. But let's put some numbers to it, and I want to hear your perspective. So the travel tech industry saw a steady increase in startup funding between 2016 and 2019. Naturally, it dropped once the pandemic hit in 2020. But since then, it's bouncing back. And in 2022, the travel industry garnered almost $6 billion globally. Now, what are you seeing on the market right now?
So there's a lot of discussions on the market. There's been many macro changes in the last year. First of all, on the tech side, funding is basically non-existent these days. I mean, you're going to get deals, but they're going to be bad. And it's pretty bad for a company to take a bad deal. On the real estate side, we have massive increases in insurance rates and interest rates. This is a pretty bad thing for investments overall. But to counteract that, what's actually happening and what really amazes me is how people think that they're always so unique. So, for example, the vacation rental industry, as much as I love it, they think it's a unique industry, when in fact, it's the same as every other industry out there. What's happening now is a combined effort of outside regulation and inside regulation. Basically, the people who are in there, they want to protect their assets and they want to protect their business, but they also want to prevent others from coming. It's called going up the ladder and then pulling the ladder up from beneath you.
Talking about hotels here.
That's certainly a big influence as well. And I remember having a really astonishing conversation with a lady in a swimming pool on Fort Myers Beach before Hurricane Ian. She owned 4 vacation rentals, and she was also running an irrigation company. So they installed these cables that water the lawn. And she was complaining that she couldn't find any staff because they only have work 6 months a year, but they need to have licensed people for that. You can't take random people. So I asked, well, why do they need licenses? I mean, that's pretty basic work. And she said, oh, I was actually the one who was leading the lobbying effort to regulate this. So she had put in, she was thinking she's now a big name in the industry, and now we're going to regulate it, make it hard for others to enter. But at the same time, she had made it hard for herself. There's a subreddit dedicated to this called Leopards Ate My Face that I'm a big fan of. But this is what's happening in the industry right now. There's a lot of confusion, but it's nothing unheard of at all. This is what usually happens when industries mature. And this is, yeah, you can blame the hotels and you can blame other people, but I mean, we have, to be honest, we should just be looking ourselves in the mirror. At the same time, there's well, not a lot, but a small part of society has got very rich on real estate since the 2008 crash. And as a result of that, they want to make sure that they stay rich and they prevent others from becoming rich. And this can, especially in North America, you can see this in the not in the vacation areas and not in the cities, but you see this in the in-betweens, in the rural areas where people moved when offices shut down. That's where you see these small communities that used to be cottage communities. Usually they're surrounded by mountains, maybe a lake. And all of a sudden, people don't want others to come there and rent out their places. And there have been smaller communities that have completely banned short-term rentals, but then they get very upset when their restaurants shut down because there's no visitors there. And they get very sad when there's no grocery store anymore because nobody's living there. But what they're really doing there is creating an area for the elite. Basically, there's, out of the people that buy vacation homes, I can split them into 2 groups. One group can afford to buy it and just keep it empty, then pay for people to come and mow the lawn and check that it's okay, and use it for 1 or 2 weeks a year. Those people are usually quite wealthy, but they're in a minority. The bigger part of people who invest in vacation rentals, they actually need some income. It lowers the cost, so they rent them out. So what these communities are saying is they don't want the people who are upper middle class. They only want the super elite to come there. Problem with the super elite is they're very busy. They don't have time to visit your local restaurants. So you're shooting yourself in the...
Yeah, sounds like a lose-lose, and finding a way to coexist, I think, is the only way forward for this in-between towns. Let's talk about some specific trends you're seeing across different markets. Before then, I just want to say something that's been fascinating to me is how 2 of the most, if not the most iconic millennial marketplaces, if you will, talking about Airbnb and Uber. I mean, they've managed not only to carve themselves a meaningful, and now short-term rentals as a whole, carve themselves a meaningful market share in the respective industries, but also they've reshaped legacy industries completely. The taxis in New York City now have an app and no more $1 million medallions, and Airbnb. We have now entire hotel chains, Marriott, Hilton, doing Airbnb-esque hotels. But the difference when it comes to regulation and internet companies, Amazon, Facebook, I mean, they didn't get regulated as they were being launched, right? Airbnb was getting regulated right off the bat because it represented the internet moving into your neighborhood, right? So yes, Facebook and Amazon are now fighting lobbying and regulation, but they have, the largest army of lobbyists in Washington. And short-term rentals being regulated when it was being born, it didn't feel like a fair fight, if you will.
No, it never was a fair fight. And I've been saying for many years that if you operate in cities, whether they're regulated or not, those regulations are bound to change. Assuming it's a popular city. If it's a dying city, then you probably don't have to worry, but then your business won't do as well either. And I mean, it benefits most of these regulations when they come into place. They benefit those who are already in the business. I think New York is an extreme case, but on the other hand, you weren't running businesses in New York. There's not that many successful operators in New York before regulation, unless you have a commercial property, in which case, of course,
Right.
a hotel can run it. But what most of these regulations tend to do, they grandfather in those who are already there, and then they don't let anyone new in. And that's something that is very popular politically, because means that the people who manage and own the vacation rentals, they obviously support it. I mean, who wouldn't want to do the same job and get double the pay? But it also benefits hotels, because hotels, they do want people to come there. They do want people to organize events, maybe a wedding, get their family together, get more people into the area, because it benefits hotels. But what they don't want is low prices, which is what you get with fair competition. So both vacation rental owners and hotels, they benefit from unfair competition, which means regulation.
Yeah, I mean, certainly some politicians in New York have decided to make short-term rentals the piñata, if you will, or the culprit of the housing shortage, for example, instead of, looking inwards and why isn't there more housing being approved faster in New York, or why aren't there incentives in place for investors to create more housing? And naturally, the hotel lobby is a lot, behind it all, instead of competing. California, on the other hand, is approaching it with a new tax that is incoming by 2025 that, from what I understand, it's not going to apply to hotels. So a lot of short-term rental operators are switching to long-term leasing.
Yeah, that's a tough one to battle, but I think also usually people have associations with the word tax. If there's because you can play around with market dynamics. I studied economics in university, so you can play around with market dynamics in many different ways. I mean, one of them is to create unfair competition, and that can be done through regulation. And some people like that. For example, hotels in New York are loving it right now, that it's unfair. But then, the moment you use the word tax, people have different connotations, and they tend to, at least on social media, usually not in real life, but
Right.
on social media, they tend to be very aggressive and say, "Oh, I'm gonna move out of this country. It's going all to hell. It's terrible." But it's the exact same thing, and I think actually California is onto something there, because hotels can never offer the experience that a vacation rental can.
Agreed.
And the other way around. I mean, I stayed at a hotel for a week last week in Orlando, and they had a massive pool and there were activities for the kids. I've never been in a vacation rental that has a pool that's bigger than the entire neighborhood, and where people come out and take care of your kids for you, and throw games, and they get to meet other kids. Like these are different products, and one of them is a commodity, hotels, and the other one is not a commodity. It's a unique experience. So I think taxing it makes sense. The rich want to pay to have that.
Interesting. So the issue may be, or the timing with higher interest rates, or being over levered. Some operators that started during COVID, maybe that's where the numbers don't cancel out for some of the operators. But I like your contrarian take, that because it's an experience and it's a unique product, and then it should be taxed. There's been complaints on social media about excessive cleaning fees, or excessive expectations from the hosts and operators, from the renters, to do the chores, basically switching the responsibility of some of the operations and maintenance to the renters. And it's something that Airbnb and the likes are looking to tackle. What do you think happened there, or how do you think we got here?
So I think that's a trend overall across all industries right now. Companies are finding ways to monetize their fees better. I think if you ever tried Uber Eats, you'll see that there's 15 fees added on. Same thing can be said about buying a concert ticket. Ticketmaster, why do you need to charge me $350 to deliver an electronic ticket that I'm actually already paying for? I would understand if you delivered a paper ticket because that actually costs money. But yeah, that's just the consumer sentiment right now. The irony is that within the hosting community, as it's called, that means property owners and property managers, they're referred to as hosts. They don't always see this as something positive. I mean, what the consumer wants is one price. That's what millennials and Gen Z wants. If they want to pay 100, they want to pay 100. They don't want anything, not 110, not
surprise
100.
fees.
Yeah, they want to pay 100, and it makes complete sense that Airbnb allows you to bake in the Airbnb fee and the cleaning fee into your price. So if the customer wants to pay 100, they actually pay 100. But a lot of property managers are against this because then they have to pay out of that 100 into Airbnb, and they have to pay their cleaners. And they don't see the big picture here. That it's the same money. It's just a marketing gimmick. But by saying, "Oh, I want, on my listing." So Airbnb has this option where you can take. So Airbnb splits their income by taking some from the guest, usually a lot, about 10, 15%, then a bit from the host, usually around 3%. But what you can do is do an all-inclusive pricing. So instead of that, let's say 16%, you pay 15% to Airbnb, which means that you can advertise the price as no fees. But a lot of hosts don't understand that this is exactly what consumers want. This is what they choose. They want to pay 100, they're going to pay 100, not 119 and 85.
I think there's definitely a lot of behavioral psychology, behavioral economics here going on. And, one could argue as well that, I want transparency in terms of the breakdown of the pricing, right? However, we're finding out that actually most people rather not and feel like the surprise fees at the end, kind of throws them all out of their equation on how much they were expecting to pay.
Yeah, and consumers are the lead driver here. I mean, if let's say you wanna rent a place for 1,000, if consumers consistently choose a place that costs 1,000 plus 300 in fees, rather than choosing a place that costs 1,300 upfront, then companies will have no incentive to give transparent pricing. If consumers prefer non-transparent pricing and they vote with every single dollar they spend, then obviously the companies are not going to do anything. One interesting market, though, is EU, where they tend to say that the average consumer is pretty stupid and needs protection, and then they go in and regulate stuff, and that's actually quite brilliant. That's why my new iPhone 15 here has a USB-C port so that I can use any damn cable I want and charge it anywhere, anytime I want, which is amazing. But that's what you wouldn't get that in an unregulated market, because if you think about it, the average consumer, 50% of the consumers out there are more stupid than the average consumer. And they don't always vote correctly with their dollars.
That is interesting. The first book that comes to mind is Misbehaving by Richard Thaler, recommended, and Nudge as well, in terms of people's incentives and how we as humans are systematically irrational. And we
exactly.
We even though something may be objectively better for our wallet or for our well-being, we may still do something that feels better, but is objectively worse off for our intentions.
I'm from a marketing background. Our entire industry wouldn't exist if people just made rational decisions. Marketing is, if you turn on the TV, you'll see a bunch of car ads, but none of them have the stuff that matters. None of them tell okay, this is the engine that's the most efficient, low fuel economy. Hey, you know, when you get into a car crash, this is the car where your kids are going to survive it and not die. Nobody talks about that. Instead, they just show some mountains, and then there's a lake, and then there's a surfboard, and then there's some stars. Like, what does that have to do with a car? Absolutely nothing.
But it's a great story for some. We love a story. We love a story.
Yes.
We love
and
being
every
told
car
stories.
out there has the same story. You know, it's
Right.
it's the mountain, it's the trees, it's a city, and
Yeah.
none of them are talking about the cars, which is the product that actually matters. I mean, when you buy a car, you're buying a car. You're not buying a mountain. Like they give you a mountain in a box.
That's funny. Taking a slight tangent to what you said earlier. I, for one, as a capitalist, I think we should let competition, we should let the open market do its thing. But, we've realized that some regulation is needed in some places, and it's all about where do we draw the line, right? If we draw the line too far, then we have to draw it shorter. But I think your example with USB-C, I mean, I'm very thankful for the EU standardizing or forcing Apple to cut their nonsense with, changing the dongles every time. I'm just thinking, imagine if we didn't have standardized light bulb sockets. Those are the little things that really go a long way in terms of scaling innovation and spreading it to everyone.
Exactly. So, I mean, 400 years ago, there was this dude called Adam Smith, and he invented this term called free market, which is something that a lot of people believe in, including me. But what many companies and individuals tend to ignore is that the free market includes, and this is 400 years old, but nobody has come up with better theories since. He had a theory that there's something called market failure. That's when the free market is doing its thing, and then it fails. I think we can all agree that 2008, the way banks were operating, they were running a free market model, and it failed. A lot of people went homeless. A lot of people didn't have food to eat. And a lot of banks even didn't survive 2008 because of a market failure. But a very common market failure is when you get a monopoly. That's when you don't have a free market anymore. Regulation is the best way. So according to Adam Smith, the only way to guarantee that you have a free market is by regulating it to make sure that it stays a free market.
Right.
But a lot of people get this backwards. They think any regulation is against the free market, when actually it's the opposite. You need regulation in order to have a free market, because otherwise you'll end up with, for example, monopoly.
Absolutely. Now, let's talk about Hostaway, all-in-one vacation rental software and Airbnb management system. All-in-one, what does that mean?
All-in-one means that it can serve the needs of pretty much anyone that is running a vacation rental business, whether you own one property or you own 10, or many of our customers, they own a couple, then they manage their friends and families, or maybe their real estate business properties. And then we have customers who have hundreds, and I think our biggest customer right now has 8,000 properties that they manage on behalf of the owner or rent them out. All-in-one means that every aspect you can think of when it comes to your business, and I won't speak in industry-specific terms, but more generic terms that apply to any business: your marketing, your sales, managing your staff, your CRM, your accounting, your money that's coming in, your money that's going out, the communication that's needed to run your everyday business. All of that can be managed through one platform. And that's exactly what Hostaway does.
Fascinating. I mean, not having to use or rely on different software or integrating, I think that saves a lot of headaches, especially for mom and pops, but also for large operations.
Exactly. And it's quite unique when you think about it, because we, for example, we are in the software industry. There's no all-in-one solution for the software industry. We have to pay 50, 60 different softwares. We have just the sales team. I think they have 5 different softwares that they work with. And it would be great if there was an all-in-one solution, but not all industries have that. But for example, restaurants, they are one that have all-in-one solutions. These point of sale systems, on one hand, they can print the tickets for the kitchen, but they can also manage the bookings on your own website, the reservations. So they are all-in-one systems. And they also know who's coming to work now, whose shift is starting right now. Vacation rentals, restaurants, hotels, and airlines are a couple of those that have all-in-one systems, but not every industry has them.
That's very cool. So let's talk about a bit about your user base, because I find it fascinating when, the same, not the same exact experience probably, but the same company, same product serving a wide variety of, sizes of operators, but also across different geographies. So talk about, your user base. How do you handle, delivering value and keeping them engaged and solving their problems for such different types of operators and across different jurisdictions?
Yeah, it's a very fascinating topic. And actually, one reason why we have been able to build this company so big so fast is that we have taken a very humble approach and say we are not unique. We are running a business just like every other business on the planet, and we can learn from their mistakes and their failures and their successes and just figure out what works and what doesn't, because other companies have failed before us. We don't have to fail. One of the things that has been the word on the market ever since I joined this industry is that it's fragmented, and that's very true. You're sitting in New York versus sitting in California or Florida or Texas. Your view on a short-term rental is going to be completely different, especially if we talk about your local short-term rentals. I mean, if you're sitting in New York City, you're not going to have any short-term rentals. It's that simple. And then again, if you're sitting somewhere in Southwest Florida, then every second house is a short-term rental. And that's just the way it's always. What we saw was that there were a lot of consolidation efforts going on in the space, and they all somehow failed. But what it boils down to is that there's different target groups when it comes to geography. For example, if you want to be big in New York, you can have an American solution. But if you want to be big in France, which is a way bigger market than New York, then an American solution is not going to do it. You need a French solution. That's just one example. Another thing is that these solutions, they focus on different segments. Typically, they call them small, SMB, and enterprise. How you then define these buckets differs from company to company, which makes it more confusing. When we have made our infrastructural decisions, there's always the question, okay, should we serve this segment or that segment? And the answer has always been both. And many aspects of the product, they scale as you grow. So the product works in one way if you have one property, but the moment you add your second property, it works in a different way. And same thing, when you reach 100 properties, the same product works in a different way. That may sound confusing, but it's actually the same thing. I mean, many other industries. I'll give a product that probably everyone has heard of, Gmail. If you're one person using Gmail, it works differently than if you're an organization of 10,000 people that are using Gmail. But it's the same product. It manages to scale from one person to 10,000 people. It just works slightly differently. But many things are the same. And that's exactly how our product is built as well, so that it can serve one property or 10,000 properties. It looks similar, but it's going to work a bit different.
Very flexible, moldable, and scalable. That's great. Yeah, talking about the different markets, just listening to Brian Chesky from Airbnb the other day, how he describes inbound, outbound, or a mix of markets. For example, you have Germany. Germans love to travel, so they are considered an outbound because they do get tourism, but not as much as Germans travel abroad. Italy and Spain, they're inbound markets because they're top tourism destinations, while Italians and Spanish don't travel as much as they receive the tourism. France is both. They have inbound and they have outbound. So just interesting the different nuances, even in markets that may seem similar. There's still different intricacies there.
Yeah, something that I think a lot of people in the industry fail to recognize is the business model of the OTA. For example, a common misconception is that Airbnb...
The online travel agencies, right?
Yeah, a common misconception is that they bring together the traveler and the one offering accommodation. That's about as far from the truth as you can get. The truth is that they're marketing engines. What they do is they are generating demand. So they're running ad campaigns to get people to do certain things. For example, book a vacation rental in Germany or in Spain. But then that has a certain cost attached to it. That cost can be different. Let's say you want to advertise a Spanish vacation rental. The cost will be different whether you advertise it to someone in New York City or someone in London or
The
someone in
cost of
Berlin.
acquisition, massively
Yes.
different.
And this is the primary driver of their business, is who is able to optimize this marketing spend the best. That's where they spend, I would say 90% of their energy is optimizing that demand generation and then making sure they have matching supply. So they're not actually trying to connect the travelers. Instead, they're trying to find the most cost-effective marketing solution. And for those of you who don't believe me, just pick a couple of random locations in Florida. Let's say Tampa, Naples, Miami, and Orlando. And then Google vacation rental for each of those locations. And what you'll see in the adverts is that you'll find different companies who are on the top. You'll find in one market, you have Airbnb who's on the top. A different market, you'll find Vrbo on the top. And that's because they have optimized their spending so well that they know exactly what one click is going to generate in that market.
I think those CAC calculations, cost of acquisition, it's definitely gets so granular when you get to the market, market by market. Marcus, you come from the EdTech space. I think education is how we get better as individuals, how we get better as humans. What can real estate technology, what can the travel technology industry learn from EdTech?
Great question. I think nobody has ever asked me that. I think one thing that I've seen in successful EdTech companies is that they are often people who have a passion but have very little expertise in the industry, and they are typically quite experienced in technology. I'll give an example. There's a company in Finland right now called Räder. They are offering English courses on a mobile app, and they're wildly successful all over Europe for high school because they have to do their exams. But the background there is not education. It's actually mobile games. The founders have been doing mobile games for decades before getting into this. That's very contrasting to the vacation rental tech space, where a lot of the technology here is founded by people who are vacation rental professionals. They have been managing their own vacation rentals and they've been in the industry a long time, but they don't know a lot about how to build a technology company. This is seen time over time in competition. You have companies that have a good marketing campaign. They say, we understand your needs as a property manager, but building technology is hard and it's expensive. And if you don't know how to do that, it doesn't matter how well you know people, how good you are in the industry and what your experience is, you still need to be able to build good technology. And that's where so many companies have failed in this space.
Interesting. You yourself build a tech team, a tech stack without a tech background. How did you do it?
Well, first of all, I've been in technology companies ever since 2001. So I had 15 years of experience. I was still a student when I started working at a mobile games company. And my founder is a full stack developer, and he also had 15 years of experience.
Okay, that helps.
Yeah. And our third co-founder, he had successfully not only worked in technology, but also built and successfully exited technology companies.
The power of a good founding team, right?
Exactly.
Complementary.
Yeah. So of course I'm the outsider, I guess, because I don't know how to write code. I stopped that when I was 15. But still, I think having whatever you do, make sure that you're good at that. So we're not going to pretend that we're the best on short-term rentals. Instead, we're just going to build the best technology because that's what we know.
Amazing. Marcus, collaboration superpower. If you could choose any person, historic or alive, to do a partnership with, who would it be?
Very good question.
And you can't say Elon Musk or Steve Jobs because that's boring.
I would have to go with Alice Cooper. I think
Yes.
he's one of the most intriguing persons that I know. So he grew to fame in the 80s and the 90s by having these scary things. I mean, to be honest, Ozzy Osbourne is pretty cool too, but he's insane, quite dement. But Alice Cooper, so he has this public image, but then what he actually does is he lives on a farm with a family, and they have no neighbors, and they have 9 children or something like that. Like he's just a family dad in his spare time who every now and then goes on a trip to deliver an amazing heavy metal experience to people where they have bats and crazy makeup, and he gets decapitated. I find that really fascinating that you can separate work and life and have a good balance. I'd like to see what we can come up with there.
Love that answer. Love that answer. Probably the best one so far to the question collaboration superpower. Marcus Räder, founder and CEO at Hostaway. Thank you so much for coming to Tangent today.
Well, thank you for having me.
If you like what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and review Tangent and share the show with a friend. This episode is produced by me, Edward Cohen. Thanks for listening to Tangent, and remember, collaboration is our superpower. So stay curious and always be learning.